Hello, welcome. This is a presentation about the A12 improvement scheme, which the consultation started on Tuesday. I'm Suzanne Buck. I'm the Transport Policy and Development Manager at Suffolk County Council. And after a brief introduction about this process, I will talk you through the slides that explain the project. So just to make you all aware, this presentation, this meeting is being recorded, and a link will be provided to the recording, probably if not by tomorrow, then early next week. As it's this type of Teams event, there isn't an opportunity for individuals to speak or raise questions directly. However, you can do that by putting questions in the chat. I'd ask if you don't anonymise, because it makes it easier to do responses if we need to get back to individuals. And after doing the presentation, we will then take some questions. I'm aware there'll probably be a lot of questions about similar types of things, so we'll try and uncover the range that people put up. So if we start off now by beginning the presentation, I shall share my screen. Whoops. So hopefully now you can all see that. So it is the A12 improvement scheme. As I say, consultation started on Tuesday. The A12 is part of Suffolk's major road network. There are a handful of major road network status roads in Suffolk, and they tend to join to the strategic road network. So in this area, it'd be the A14. As a major road network route, it recognises the importance of the route not only for the local communities and businesses, but also the economy, particularly in this area, the visitor economy, and the A12 as a prime access to the energy coast. So in looking at where to do improvements on the A12, we looked at existing issues and how they might get worse based on planned growth. So we did some modelling in response to recent local plan updates, and it showed that this particular stretch of the A12 that we're looking at in the project, the issues there would get worse. And the obvious question is, why now? You know, this has been an issue for some time, and that really comes down to opportunity. The Department for Transport, up until very recently, in fact until the major road network was established, there wasn't really the opportunity to put forward projects for this sort of size and cost, and that limiting factor in the funding opportunities meant that that the opportunities to look at schemes like this was not possible. So the current funding for the major road network runs from 2020 to 2025. So that's looking at schemes to be substantially complete by 2025. In 2019, we submitted a number of bids to the Department for Transport, and we were successful in getting development funding for this particular project. So just to outline the state that we're at, it's the outline business case. So this is developing the scheme and establishing if there is a case to put forward for this to be funded. Funding is not at this time guaranteed. So in terms of what's happening on the A12, this image here uses Department for Transport annual average daily traffic flows for both the current year, so this one was 2019, and then looking forward at 2025 and 2040. And the Department for Transport looks at what the predicted growth is going to be based on, amongst other things, local plans, but other growth factors as well. And as you can see, between the A12 at the A14 junction of Seven Hills and Woods Lane junction, just north of Woodbridge, there is a significant increase in the current flows, from up to 24% in 2040. So the objectives of the scheme are to improve the capacity of the major road network and reduce its congestion, and that helps improve journey time reliability, which is a key factor for supporting the local economy and businesses, and also recognising the location of this particular part of the route of the A12 relative to the port. So we obviously have Felixstowe, which is very close. There's port in Ipswich, and less so the port in Lowestoft. Supporting economic and housing growth is a key part of the project, because that's the growth that we're looking at to mitigate, and also recognising that this route is very important for the visitor economy and for the energy coast, looking at the number of wind farms that are coming forward, and also if Sizewell C is approved, the potential impacts of the increased traffic associated with the construction of that development. However, this isn't just about roads, and what we're also looking to do is to improve walking and cycling connectivity, to improve sustainability options for travel, and also to look at improving conditions for bus services and bus users. So what is the scheme? There's a total of 8 junctions and one section of carriageway that we're looking to dual. But if I start at the south end first, the A12, A14 junction, which is 7 Hills, is the first junction, going up then to Vauxhall Road junction, and then to Barrack Square, which is the BT junction as we call it locally, and then to the Anson Road junction next to the large Tesco's, the A1214 Main Road junction at the Park and Ride, and then through the main part of that dual section there'll be no work along that section. We then start to look at the Sleckford roundabout at its junction with the B1438 into Woodbridge. As I say, this section here where we're looking at widening the existing single carriageway so we have a consistent dual section, the Dobbies roundabout or the Grunsborough Road roundabout, and then finally the junction with the Woods Lane roundabout. And by doing this work, we would then end up with a dual section right from the 7 Hills junction up to Woods Lane. I will come to the sustainable measures and the locations of those separately, but initially we're going to be looking at the A12 junctions. So the approach we've taken is a corridor approach. So we've been looking at providing consistency in design. This is important not only for safety reasons, but also it improves the efficiency of the route. Also, we've been looking at proportionate improvements. So it's not what ultimately completely solves the solution at each junction, because that would have a tendency to over-engineer the junction. And we need to be mindful that going forward, we do want to be increasing the level of sustainable travel. So it's about having proportionate improvements that can accommodate the traffic and manage the traffic. So by 2040, we are looking to have a lot more sustainable measures. And as I say before, that's why we've got some greater connectivity options in the scheme. And where we are now is that we put together our thinking as to what would be the most appropriate solutions, and we will be using the feedback from the consultation and from landowners and stakeholders to optimise those designs, and it's those that would then be considered within the outline business case. So Sizewell C traffic flows will be considered. It's currently in planning, but obviously hasn't got consent yet. But actually the flows, because we're also looking at 2040, the traffic flows associated with that fall within that wider envelope. So we've sort of considered them by default, but we will be doing some further work around those. Now I'm going to go through each of the junctions in turn, and on each slide there will be 2 tables, one for the AM peak and one for the PM peak. And what those tables will show would be the predicted delay in seconds per vehicle. Now that's not by arm, it's averaged across the whole junction, so some may experience a little bit more delay, others significant improvement. So if I move on to the A12, A14 junction first at 7 Hills. So this is quite zoomed out, and I will go into a smaller section in a moment. But what we're demonstrating here is that we're doing quite a lot of work on the slip roads. Now the issues at this junction are queuing from the north arm here, but also you get queuing on the off slip from the Felixstowe direction and also within Felixstowe Road. So what we're looking to do here is to widen and extend the slip roads to get greater capacity. On this junction here, we're going to have a free flow, which I'll be able to show in a bit more detail. And as you can see, AM and PM peak per vehicle bearing in mind that the number of vehicles are going to increase over time as well, show definite benefits in 2025 and 2040. 2025 is our estimated year of opening, and 2040 is what the Department for Transport require us to model to assess future impact, to show that there are longer term benefits than just the opening year. So if we zoom into this area, you can see we've increased the number of lanes on approach and within the circulatory area. We're not doing anything to the existing structure, but we are putting in traffic lights to be able to manage the flows. And on this one, as I said, from Felixstowe coming down, the idea is you'd have a free flow going down into Felixstowe Road. Now, I think I'm aware, before we even started the consultation, actually, that the idea of traffic lights is going to be controversial. However, the reason that we've ended up at this, and we have looked at a number of options for each junction, is that traffic lights help manage flows. So they are particularly useful where you have an imbalance of flows, and you tend to have see imbalance where there are queues back on specific arms. So here, where you get queues back here, here and here, that demonstrates that there's a need to balance those flows, and the best way to do that is using signals. In using traffic lights, we would make them mover, which means that they are intelligent within the junction itself, but also those junctions that are within the right proximity to each other, we would also look to link those so that you get the connectivity of flow between the junctions. So if I move up then to Vauxhall Road roundabout, the issues we have here, again, it's about around this imbalance of flows. So particularly in the PM, for example, evening commuter time, the traffic from the north here has the priority around the roundabout to go into Vauxhall Road, and that causes extensive queuing back on this arm. The other issues we have here in terms of improving capacity at the same size roundabout, we need to look at improving the alignment of the approach arms, and that also then enables us to get better queuing within those approach arm capacities. So as you can see here, again, it's partially signalised, so not all arms. So the A12 and the movements on the roundabout itself are signalised, but the Vauxhall Road and Newbourne Road are give way, so they just take the opportunities and gaps in the traffic. And as you see again, there is significant benefit in terms of time savings, delay reduction at this junction. So if I move up to the Barrack Square junction next, we have two options here. So that this is the first option. So Eagle Way as the southern access into Martlesham Heath. You've got BT Adastral Park. This is the Oldie and Gloucester Road. And the issues that we experience here is there is extensive queuing back, particularly in the morning peak, from this junction going north to the next junction along. And there is also quite a lot of queuing and delay around Gloucester Road. In the PM peak, there is a lot of delay on Gloucester Road, and particularly going into Barrack Square as employment areas, particularly BT, but other employment areas all come out and try and then get onto the network. So the first option, which would take a considerable piece of land, we try and stay within the highway boundary wherever possible, but the beauty of this particular option is it separates out the Gloucester Road junction and the Barrack Square junction. And yes, again, it is signalised, but that helps to balance and control those flows. We've also got increased lanes on approach where possible, and again that just helps separate out the traffic to improve the flow around the junction. Now what you might see here is you say, well, in the PM there isn't a huge amount of benefit, but actually this is where we're looking at the junction as a whole. So as the junction as a whole might not show the full level of benefit, but what you'll see, what we've been seeing within the more detailed elements of the model is actually the arms that are currently congested and causing delay do have significant improvements. So those figures are lower because we're looking at the balance of the junction as a whole. And this is the proportionate approach that we're talking about, not over engineering it for a particular short period. So as you say, this one takes some extra land, and we're quite keen, you know, wherever possible, not to take land. And if this isn't possible, we therefore have a second option which utilises the existing highway boundary. And what this does is, again, is increasing the lanes on approach, again signals, but we separate out Barrack Square and Gloucester Road and signalise that. So this is managing the flows, but having less space to be able to manage the flows around the junction. What you find is that the improvements overall are not quite as good. If we move up to the next junction, you see, I haven't pointed out before, but each junction has a letter. And if you look at the consultation material, we reference the letters throughout to try and assist with you being able to locate it. So this junction here is Anson Road Junction, and it's close to the large Tesco's. You've got Beardmore Park, so you've got Next and Marks and Spencer's. And what we found here is there's a real need to consider these two junctions together. Those that live locally and use this area are aware of there's quite a lot of congestion, particularly on Anson Road, associated with how this roundabout works. And so what we're looking to do is two things: is to signalise this roundabout that provides the benefit of better crossings for pedestrians, but also then we'll be able to link that with what we're doing here, which is again increased capacity on approach to the junction and signals. This is the Park and Ride roundabout at the A1214 main road going off to Kesgrave here, and although it looks quite expansive in terms of the colouring we put in, it's relatively minor changes we're looking at here. So we're looking at, this is the exit for an access to the Park and Ride for the buses, and this is Portal Avenue, currently goes to the Suffolk Police Headquarters, and there's also a potential development site down this area as well for housing. So we're looking at signalising that junction and then coordinating those with the main junction here, which currently doesn't happen. We're increasing the width on approach to the roundabout, and also just slightly changing the number of lanes and how they work within the roundabout here. This is quite a complex junction because it's got 5 arms, which are notoriously difficult to manage, you know, we found that the only alternative to this really was to go mega, which was to have a grade separated junction or something called a throughabout. A throughabout wouldn't really benefit the local traffic, but it'd be excellent for the A12, but we didn't feel that was a good balance. So we've come up with this proportionate approach, which does again show benefit in the 2 peak periods. Then we move across towards Woodbridge. So this is the Seckford roundabout, so it's the junction of the A12 with the B1438, which is the southern access to Woodbridge. And what the problems are here are predominantly on this western A12 arm, which experiences considerable tailbacks, both sort of in the evenings, but also during the summer periods as well. And so a part of that is because of the dualling, but not all of it. So what we're looking to do here is, again, we looked at other options, but here we've considered segregating the lane. So if you're coming from the A12 and want to go north, you're in the inside lane, and you then continue along there without having to stop. And because we're then also proposing the dual, which I'll come on to in a minute, there isn't a need for that immediate merger of traffic that may come from the B1438. So you don't get that delay or kickback to cause queuing here. So a relatively minor change, but as you can see, showing quite significant benefit. This here is to do with the sustainable link, so I shall get onto that towards the end, but we've also increased the number of lanes on approach to again help the flow at this junction. So the dualling section, so at the moment from the turn off to Seckford Hall, there's a short piece of single carriageway, and then obviously it opens out as it approaches the junction. So what we're looking to do here is to dual the whole section in both directions, and then we would be removing the lay-by on the eastern side, and that enables us to put this quite extensive shared use pedestrian cycling shared use path in, but we would relocate the lay-by on the western side. Now, you probably see we put it sort of fairly obvious in the middle there. We'd also be seeking this to be 50 miles an hour, and the reason for that is that the design standards are such that if we went to 70 miles an hour, that we'd need approximately another 30 metres worth of land, and it'd become quite a massive undertaking and very costly. So bearing in mind that north of the Dobbies Grunsborough Road roundabout that it's 40, we think 50 is an appropriate speed, and again proportionate for what we're looking to do. This is an indicative cross section looking north. So we've got two dual carriageways with a central barrier, and then next to it a segregated footway and cycleway, not necessarily with an upstand there, but enough space. This is about 5 metres to enable pedestrians and cyclists to use this link. And then if we move up to Junction G, which is the A12 Grunsborough Road access, again, a lot of the issues here are primarily around the imbalance of flows, particularly in the morning where there's a very dominant right turn from the A12 southern arm into towards Woodbridge, because you've got schools obviously, as well as access to the town centre. And there's also a reasonable flow from Grunsborough Road going across there, and this causes considerable tailbacks, which with the planned growth are shown to get significantly worse. Now again, we looked at lots of options here, including taking the roundabout out and just putting crossroads, but ultimately what works best is increasing the size of that roundabout so that we are able to stop traffic at a point to allow the flows from the A12. You can see here that on the Grunsborough Road here it's a give way, and actually it is a give way here. These traffic lights are actually looking at a controlled pedestrian cycle crossing. So this isn't traffic lights to do with the junction, this is enabling the those that come on the cycle route from the north here to continue down onto this new route. You can also see down here that we've got a controlled crossing for pedestrians and cyclists. Now that links into the wider rights of way network and also enables access to this location. And the final junction is Junction H, which is the Woods Lane junction. And this is a difficult one because ultimately it is the level of flows from the A12 turning right into Woods Lane that cause most of the delay and issues here. And this is one where we have to consider the balance of looking at getting better movement across the junction as a whole, rather than significant savings. So what we've looked at here is signalising just to be able to, these just break the flow of this cross movement to enable this flow on the north arm to come down. And the Woods Lane, we've increased the number of lanes on approach, and that would be give way, so they can go whenever there's a break in the traffic. And the marginal in terms of, because the dominant flows are this way, by causing that delay to enable this traffic to come down, the savings aren't significant. And so we're very interested in people's view of whether they think the problem is significant enough to do something here or not. But this is definitely a junction that going forward with the local plan is showing to have more pressure on it. So next we move on to the sustainable measures. And first of all, looking at the Martlesham area. So if I start from the bottom, this is the Foxwell Road junction, and this is the Brightwell Lakes development, which has consent already. And what we're saying here is we've taken a view that on this length it's not about creating access and movement along the A12. We recognise that this is a very heavily trafficked piece of road, and there's good connectivity either side, so it's about getting across it. So what we've done is identified two potential locations that either an overbridge or an underpass could be put in to provide more connectivity. That would then link into the wider network. We're not looking to solve all the issues of walking and cycling in this area. We are focused on the A12 corridor, but it is about linking to that wider network and providing the opportunity for that wider network to be improved at a later date with separate funding under separate schemes. The orange here is the location of the existing bridge that goes over and down next to Martlesham Leisure, and we're very much aware that this is not an attractive route. It's a very well used route, and so what we're considering here is replacement with a wider bridge that's more appropriate to the level of traffic and more appealing for people to use. The green is really the existing underpasses, minor improvements around lighting and things such as that. And then the pink spot, this is where we're looking at signalising that junction to Tesco's and Wickes and Costas and Marks and Spencer's, for example. And what that will do is provide pedestrian movements across all of those arms. At the moment, it's not a very appealing place to cross. And then we move to the Woodbridge section. So again, if I start at the top on this one, this is Woods Lane and there's a bridleway, and we're saying the potential for a controlled crossing of the A12 at this point. This would mean that the speed limit would have to go to beyond that point. And then this is existing crossings. You get to the junction of Grunsborough Road, and we've got that controlled crossing across Grunsborough Road on Woodbridge side, across the A12 just south to provide access to Dobby's area, but also to the wider rights of way network. Another control crossing at Seckford Hall, because it's an informal crossing at the moment. And then what we're saying, this is the route down, walking and cycling and going to Seckford Hall Road. And then what we're saying is there are two options. One, you can come down towards the football ground, which is identified for housing development, but then come around there, and because of the way that the B1438 is in a cut-in, there is an opportunity to maybe put an overbridge there to then provide that walking cycling connection down into Martlesham. The alternative would be to come across to the Duke of York, I think it was the Seal, and then to have a control crossing at this point, which would take people down onto Sandy Lane, and then not necessarily at this point, but at some point along this road to have to make this a quiet lane. So basically stop up for through traffic, but retain it as an access all the way through for walking and cycling. And what that would do would enable all existing accesses to be retained, but it makes it a lot quieter and a lot more appealing as a route for walking and cycling. So public transport measures. We had a conversation with bus operators and talked about what we could do to improve public transport in this area. First, I've said that they've actually had to reduce the services in this area quite significantly, and that's mainly because of the delay and congestion. A key factor for bus services is the ability to have reliability. And they don't have that. So instead of services necessarily going through Martlesham Heath, they will come down and just go along the A12. So we're very keen to improve access to this area for bus services. And so we will be looking at the potential for bus priority through each of these junctions, particularly this junction, which is the BT junction, because then that provides the opportunity for a bus link to go north on Eagle Way, and then just outside north of the square to have a bus gate, so only buses could go through on this route, and that provides a very effective route for bus services. The other link we're looking at is to utilise Portal Avenue and then to put in a new link from the end of that road down to Eagle Way here, and that link would enable buses to avoid these junctions and provide sort of bus priority route. And here you can see there is a suggestion for a bus interchange, and that would enable different routes, bus routes, to be able to have to stand there in between in between their service timetables, but also improve the connectivity between those different bus services. So if we get on to the timeline, the public consultation is now, runs to midnight on March the 19th, so that's about 5.5 weeks. The business case work will continue, and that we will submit that to the Department for Transport once we get, well, assuming we get permission from the Cabinet to submit in the summer, and that would enable us then, once we get funding, if we're successful, to develop the design and progress that detail and have further engagement both with landowners, the public and stakeholders. And the earliest we would be able to start construction would be in autumn 2023, looking at completion by 2025. So estimated cost between 40 and 60 million. This will really depend on, as much as anything, on which of the sustainable options we go for. And, you know, for example, a footbridge might be very different to an underpass in terms of cost. So that's why we've given a range there. So this is one of two live events. Another one is next Wednesday. There is a website where all the information can be found, and I would very much encourage people to go onto the website to access the survey. Obviously, you know, we take on board all the comments in the survey, but that's the best way to respond if you have any views. We're having meetings with landowners and businesses throughout the period, and there'll be social media information shared and further promotion as we go through the period, just to remind people that we're out there and we're very keen to hear their comments. So if I just stop here in terms of the overall route. One question which I get asked a lot is why only this part of the A12? Why not the whole of the A12? Now, the whole of A12, I mean, it's approximately 40 miles from Seven Hills up to just south of Lowestoft, and actually the issues and traffic flows along that route vary quite considerably, and you have to think about what it is that you will how it is you'll be able to make a case for funding for these. And so one of the things, a key factor in terms of funding, is looking at congestion and delay. And actually this section of the A12 between Seven Hills and Woods Lane has the highest traffic flows. It drops off quite considerably after that, anywhere between 60 and 70% less traffic as you go up towards Lowestoft. You also need to look at housing and economic growth. And when we did the modelling for the local plan, this was the length that tended to show up as problematic. And then it's about getting that benefit in terms of the value for money, in terms of the benefits versus the costs. So all those things fed into this being the length to look at, combined with the typical level of an MRN fund, which is around 50 million. So all those factors combined mean that we need to look at this section first. It doesn't mean that going forward we can't look at those other sections, but they will be different types of schemes rather than a comprehensive end-to-end treatment. The other factor that I just want to touch on is the environment. So the business case approach does include a consideration of environmental impact, and we're committed to minimising those impacts. Next steps, what's happening at the moment is we're trying to organise access to do surveys, and there'll be some baseline studies underway looking at the existing environment and then assessing how the changes would impact on that. And in looking at those impacts, we look at how we can avoid, reduce or mitigate the environmental impacts. So a lot of work still to be done, but you know, we need to get feedback really on what we're proposing now. And as I say, a proportional approach, trying to stay within the highway boundary wherever possible, and not over engineering. So future proofing, but bear in mind that, you know, ambition for a more sustainable future. So what I'd like to do now is go out and ask or answer the questions. Hopefully you've been putting some questions up there. But before I do that, I would just like to ask the team to introduce themselves and their role, because I shall read out the questions, but I may not be the person who's answering them. So if I can start with Sam, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Good evening, everyone. My name's Sam Cliff. I'm the project manager for Suffolk County Council.
Hi, I'm Catherine Potts. I'm Consultation Officer for Transport Strategy at Suffolk County Council.
Good evening. My name is Dan Johnson. I'm a Senior Transport Planner at Suffolk County Council.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Biggs and I am the WSP Project Manager for this scheme.
Hi there, I'm Daniel Yardley. I am the Environmental Specialist from WSP.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Johns. I'm the Traffic Modelling Lead from WSP.
Thank you. If you could just put the slide on, I think it'd be useful just to have the overall route plan on there. Thank you very much. So so then we're going to go to questions. Now within the Teams window that you have at the top, you'll see that there are two people showing participants, but then not the one next to that, but the one further along, there's a show Q&A. So if you click on that, you will get the published questions that get asked, and they're the ones I'll be reading out to provide a response to. However, ultimately we will be providing responses to all of these as part of putting up the presentation on the website. So so definitely go and have a look at the link, but also there's a general Q&A document on the website that throughout the consultation period will be updated in response to questions we receive. So if I start with the first one. So it's a good job you can't see me because I'm having to lean right in and it'd be quite daunting. So because my eyesight's not wonderful. So first one is details only show delays for all arms. Can we have the delays for each arm? So I think so at the moment we are just showing it because these aren't the final designs. So what we're demonstrating is that the junction as a whole works. As I explained by each junction, for example, the BT junction at Barrack Square, that the overall results don't demonstrate the improvements to those coming out of Barrack Square in particular at PM peak. But that is something that will be available once we complete the overall modelling work as part of the business case. But for now, presenting it as an overall junction is seen the best way to go. Thank you. Okay. I've got the same question twice. Oh, was a grade separated junction considered for junction C? So junction C is the BT roundabout. If I can ask Sam to provide the response to this, please.
Yeah, of course. So we haven't considered a grade separated junction for this roundabout because of the land take requirements of a grade separated junction. To get the clearance either over or under the existing road, you need to go back a long way and you need to extend and widen a long way. So it'd have quite a big impact on the residential properties and businesses around this roundabout. So we've looked at a number of options at this roundabout, but they've all been at grade options.
Thank you, Sam. And yes, we have looked at two options to try and optimise what we can do on the same level at that junction. Has BT cycling group been consulted? So in terms of individual groups, up until the consultation, we've only engaged with some key landowners. So going forward, we're happy to engage with any groups that feel that they, they would have some views on this or want to influence. But ultimately, the questionnaire provides ample opportunity, not only in, selecting preferences, but also lots of free text box. So I would very much recommend as a default to go to that to submit any views. Have surrounding footpaths been reviewed to upgrade to cycle track to join to useful routes to Woodbridge and Ipswich? Could I ask either Sam or Dan to respond to this, please?
Yep, of course. So what we've looked at as part of this scheme is we've looked at the connectivity across the A12, and near the football club we've looked at providing a new facility alongside the A12, and where we're proposing the crossings, we then connect into the existing network. So we don't go any further than the existing network as part of this scheme, but it does provide opportunity to improve the existing network as part of a subsequent scheme.
Yes, I mean, as always with schemes, particularly of this size, you have to be able to stop somewhere, and so we're providing the opportunity for that further piece of work. Thank you, Sam. So Junction F, A12 North Outer Lane. So Junction F is the Sackford roundabout, A12 B14 38. So the North Outer Lane will continue to be used by those fast tracking queues on the inner lane. Can this be avoided? Sorry, Sam, again, another one for you.
Yeah, so I think this is about the vehicles on the right-hand lane coming down the hill in front of the football club and using the right-hand lane to carry on along the A12, and you can use both lanes to do that. There's not really a way to stop that. It's a two-lane entry into the roundabout, both of them straight on, and that needs to be retained for capacity reasons. So there's no way to avoid that, really.
Oh goodness, sorry. It's gone. Right. Okay, just waiting for another question to come up. Okay, so whilst I can see the philosophy from an environmental perspective, stopping and starting at traffic lights generates high level of air pollution, can more dedicated slips be incorporated, for example, A12 North at Junction H? Okay, so you're saying at Junction H, which is the Woods Lane junction, to have free flow going north, and this is something we are currently actually looking at, but it's not an obvious. It's not as obvious as it first seems. You are right in that traffic lights do stop, but they manage flows. So what you get is rather than say two arms not experiencing any delay and probably feeling there are no issues with the junction, those on the other two arms that experience significant delay and possibly stay in that queue idling for a lot longer than they would do at traffic lights. So the idea, as I said at the front end of the presentation, is to balance those flows. I don't know, sorry Steph to put you on the spot, but is there anything else that's worth just picking up in terms of delays at signal roundabouts rather than just free flow roundabouts?
Yeah, I think, as you say, the kind of intelligent nature of the traffic signals that we're looking at for these junctions along this stretch means that they detect traffic on the approaches, which obviously attempts to minimise the overall traffic delays across the whole junction. So I think yeah, I think we need to look at it in terms of the kind of intelligent traffic signals that would be used rather than there being a kind of fixed time to the traffic signals, which would potentially lead to increased delays. These would be done in an intelligent way with loops in the road to detect the traffic and manage the levels of traffic accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much, Steph. So next question. During construction, has consideration been given to limiting traffic using the B1438 through Woodbridge to avoid delays? During construction. So I assume this is just around. I'm not really quite sure what's being got at here. So, but would we be looking at during the construction period limiting traffic going on the B1438? Sam.
I mean, we would look at phasing as part of the. Obviously, we haven't looked at this this yet, but construction phasing will be a big part of the process going forward, and we will have to think about what suitable alternative routes are. You know, the Woodbridge through route via the B1438. You know, would not be a particularly suitable route for traffic to go. So we'd have to look at the phasing, look at the contractor's plan in due course, really.
Yeah, so I think, you know, phasing, you hit on it there, Sam, it is key, isn't it? So we're not saying there wouldn't be any disruption, but obviously looking when considering how this is constructed, we need to look at those wider impacts of traffic management in particular. Thank you. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay. Right. Okay. Is there a possibility of using part-time lights on the major junctions to control at peak times only? Again, this is quite an interesting issue. So as Steph was saying earlier, that using mover gives you that flexibility in how the traffic signals work. So it's not a fixed time rotation of the lights. It monitors where the traffic is coming from and adjusts accordingly. Part-time signals is something that we are looking at the moment, but they are not always particularly good on safety grounds. People can get confused as to when they are on or not. But it isn't something we've ruled out. But at the moment, when we are looking at mover, at the intelligent signals as a way of managing the flows rather than part-time. Okay, at junction E, which is the A1214 main road junction, has any consideration been made to allow for the increased traffic expected for the recently constructed Brethren Hall of Main Road? So the traffic flows within the modelling that we've done has taken on board the all the growth in the local plan model, and I believe some background growth as well. But if I can pass to Michael Johns from WSP, he's our modeller, to be able to explain what we've considered in terms of future flows.
Thank you, Suzanne. You're absolutely right. So we've taken account both local growth assumptions across the ISPA area in terms of housing and employment growth. So we have an understanding of where the housing and employment growth is going to happen at a local level, but this is also constrained at a national level according to DFT projections. So in terms of the specific question about that location, we can by all means look into it in terms of our local assumptions, but we do have a very large and exhaustive set of assumptions across the ISPA area in terms of how we've then allowed that to change traffic growth.
Thank you. And just to, you know, we are really very bad within our industry at using acronyms. So ISPA is the Ipswich Strategic Planning Area, and it's a piece of work that was done to assess the impact of combined local plans. So it looked at the local plan proposals for Suffolk Coastal as it was before it came part of East Suffolk, but also Ipswich and Bayborough and Mid Suffolk, recognising that there's lots of connections between those local authorities in this area. So that was just a reference there for ISPA. And if we, apologies if we use any other acronyms, we will try not to. Right, so next one is, are there any final questions?
Yeah.
So I mean, don't feel that you know, if something comes to you later or as a result of looking at the consultation material, then please, you know, do come forward with them. But before we go, if there are no other questions, I'd just like to emphasise the importance of doing the survey. You know, this is where we will ultimately get most of our feedback from. The survey does include quite a large selection of free text boxes, so you are able to express your views on those. And yes, so I think if there's nothing else, I haven't seen anything else come up. Then I would just like to thank those who've joined us today. A link will be provided to a recording of this, but as I said before, it'd be very good if you could access the website and look at the consultation material there, but also access the survey at that location. So again, and I'd just like to thank the rest of the team for joining us this evening, and we hope that you will engage with the consultation. Thank you.